Well, hello there, and welcome back to Read Becca. It's time, once again, for my weekly chatty catch-up on everything I've read, everything I'm currently reading, and everything I'm looking forward to reading, as well as some general lifey chit-chat and catch up on my week and how that's going. So I read a bunch of things this week, and mostly kind of short, a mix of light and heavy. Let's start with this is a very little about 55-page short story, Anne-Marie the Beauty by Reza and translated by Alison Streyer, I believe from the French. And Anne-Marie is our main character. She is an elderly woman at the time she's narrating this. This is told in kind of a stream of consciousness style, but rather than the stream of consciousness being all run together, you can see each line basically is a thought. And they're very observational. It feels like amusing, but Anne-Marie is at the beginning talking about her own funeral and thinking about her funeral and end of life. But then she's looking back on her life as this performer up and coming, and while she had major plays going on in a theater, and her friend Gigi. And we don't really ever dive deeply, but it is mainly focused on that relationship, on Gigi's own life and sort of family, and then Gigi's end of life and funeral as well, and the ways that Anne-Marie perceives that. So I didn't really connect with it significantly. I did enjoy reading this, but there wasn't anything that really significantly stood out to me overall. And I got to the end and realized that the author is also a playwright, and it makes sense, writes this in a style that I think would lend itself to a monologue. So thinking about the potential of that and what an actor could bring to a monologue in this, I think made me feel like this is even stronger than I thought it was in text. I would really enjoy seeing it performed as a monologue because there is so much range there that an individual could bring to it. But anyway, so I enjoyed this. It wasn't super memorable to me in this format, but I did enjoy my time with it. Next, for Pride Month, I picked up a graphic memoir called Phlox by Nichols, and I really enjoyed this. I felt like I connected with this very personally in a lot of ways because I saw so much of sort of my own background in this. And Nichols is a trans man who grew up in the South in the American evangelical denomination of Southern Baptists and felt a lot of general just shame and fear based on the teachings of that denomination. But beyond that, he also thought at the time he was a lesbian, and so was full of a lot of internalized homophobia and self-hatred out of the teachings there. But what the title refers to, Phlox, has an obvious connotation to churches, and the flock is the church. But he takes it to a different perspective of having different flocks in his life, his family, his church, his friends and teachers, just different groups in his life that fulfilled different needs. And so even the church he's looking at in this lens where there are all these negatives, but he's able to find all this support from his church through really hard circumstances in his life in youth as well. And so that's the sort of central conceit and delivery of this graphic memoir. And I found that so interesting because rather than totally focusing on the negative, it was very much about there are positives everywhere I went, and I had to sort of find them. Hard family circumstances, I was able to lean on and find support in the church. When things were going on with the church, I was able to turn to these friends. And at different times, people are filling in different gaps in his life. I don't know that I loved the art style. I especially liked the more cartoony styled art. When he is drawing people sort of, or other people than himself, they tend to be a little bit more dramatic and liney, I guess. And I didn't love that style as much, but I did really like this. I think that the ways that he found to navigate his circumstances and find himself over time was really, really interesting. And especially going back to the church aspect, which didn't dominate the whole thing, but it was prominent to the first half of the book. That particular exploration, like there is this whole moment of realization and understanding that his church may have a version of a thing of Christ, but he was able to find his own expression of his faith and understanding of where he finds the still small voice of God and maintain a relationship with his own faith through nature mainly. So he sees God in nature and he feels connected with a higher power in nature, and remained Christian through that as his understanding of the way he's connected to God. And I thought that was so interesting. So even before kind of moving away from the particular church he was involved in, he found his own way of continuing his faith and feeling connected with that. Then he went to college, and in college it was this consortium of ideas and so many new thoughts and ways of being that he hadn't been exposed to, and that kind of opened up his whole world in positive and negative ways. There's a real exploration of getting involved in drinking and drugs and trying to find identity and understanding of who he is in this chaotic place that's also full of shame, and struggling through that, but also finding so much joy in college, in being away from everything he'd known, in finding all these new things, in being a person who strives very much academically and has a passion for academics, and finding joys there. And so there is always this duality, I think, in what he's expressing and exploring. But it does end, I would say, on a very hopeful note of having worked through a lot of things and kind of finding where he is happiest. And yeah, I just enjoyed that so much. So this was a fantastic memoir. And I think just about anyone who's been through religious deconstruction, at least, will find connections with this, even if you are not queer. I found so much relatable here. But yeah, this was really great, and I connected with it. I think the one maybe drawback on this is it feels a little oversimplistic. I don't think this is aimed at like a YA audience at all, but I think it could be YA appropriate because of that tone that's taken with it. But I found it just to be a little bit repetitive and simplistic at points. Otherwise, I think this was just really well executed and clearly communicated, which I think doesn't always come through in a graphic memoir entirely, or it feels very fragmentary. This doesn't. So, success, I think. Then I buddy read The Sorrows of Young Werther by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, and it was translated from, I believe, German by R.D. Boylan. This is a classic. It's a short one, and it is told in a sort of letters to a friend and diary sort of format. And we are obviously hearing from young Werther, and he is a truly tragic and sorrowful figure, but he's also kind of a ridiculous young man. And so Dia and I were kind of laughing at him a bit while also feeling sorry for him. But this was mostly just self-ruination that he was wallowing in. And yet it's so sad, because he truly is swinging wildly to extremes of happiness and joy, and then into these very dark depths of despair. He is kind of a ladies' man whose head turns over every new woman he meets, but then he becomes fixated on a woman who he can't have. She's promised to someone else, of course, but they have a friendship, and he keeps trying to maintain this friendship and becoming ever increasingly soured on everything around him other than her, fixated on how things could work, could be if it were just them, and trying to go about his life while also kind of being unable to think about anything else or move forward with other things, losing his joy in other things over his fixation on her. And so it's quite sad and tragic, and it is very sorrowful. But at the same time, even as he is in this very manic depressive type of behavior, he has such a beautiful outlook because he is an artist and he has brought such meaning to his life through art. He kind of thinks a lot of himself, unfortunately, and really thinks he has things figured out, but you see what a naive young man he is. And yet he writes these incredible passages, and the way he sees the world, the nature writing, even in his dark moments, is just so gorgeous. He really reminded me a lot of Edgar Allan Poe, and the writing, the nature writing really kind of does, and his extreme emotionality, the despair that he falls into, the ways he is a ladies' man is very aligned with Poe. Poe was constantly writing love poems to women and getting pushed off and falling into despair about it. Yeah, it really reminded me of him for sure, even though this would have been a little different time. But like, it was very easy to read and understand who this character is, feel sorry for him, but also see that this is very self-fulfilling in terms of the the tragedy and difficulties that he's creating for himself. Like, he has so many opportunities and so much to enjoy in his life, so many benefits to himself. He seems to be a well-to-do young man, but yet he just keeps driving into the ground over this complete obsession that he has. And so it does have a lot of really interesting philosophical discussions as well about how he perceives God, about how he thinks about the world, and also some really difficult ones about things like self-harming and the choice over one's life or death. Things like that I did not expect to be contemplated in this time in the late 1700s for sure, but he really is grappling through those philosophical discussions. So in a short book, I think there was a lot of meat here, a lot of really beautiful writing, and I enjoyed it despite the tragic nature of this story. It was very enjoyable read, and I am so thankful that Dia pushed me to get in on it with the buddy read. So fantastic one. And then another very positive was Time Loops and Meet Cutes by Jackie Lau. This is her latest traditionally published book, and this is probably the least romancy of the books of hers I have read. And you can see we've got a couple here, and they're kind of different every time because there is a time loop here. It's pretty traditional Groundhog Day setup, very much, where we have two characters, and Noelle is our main character, and then Cam is the love interest, and we do get both perspectives. But I will say this is really Noelle's story, and that's why I would say it's less of a romance than anything else I've read from her, because she is really struggling, has a job that is burning her out, really. And one night she goes to a night market in Toronto. Very prominently, Jackie Lau writes Asian Canadian characters and focuses a lot on family and culture expectations surrounding that experience, and also food. There's a lot of great food. But she goes to this night market and has dumplings at this kind of sketchy dumpling booth where there's no line. And the woman serving the dumplings gives her the dumplings, and then it seems to be sort of gone. And she has the dumplings and wakes up the next day, and it is June 20th again, which was interesting to be reading this as the time that she was stuck in the loop was happening. But also, we are getting Cam's perspectives dropped in here and there, and his perspectives have usually a month associated at the top when his chapter starts. So we know that he is outside of that loop as far as his chapters. And so we are focused on Noelle going through this loop, trying to figure out how to get out, of course. But I was struck with the idea that time loop stories would be solved and would basically not be needed if these people had therapy. Because a time loop story, we all like it for the reasons that people go to therapy. It's really them working through and having to take a hard look at what they went through in their day, at what's going on in their life, and do some serious introspection about points of improvement. And so I enjoyed that immensely, but it takes the time to give Noelle as the main character that focus. And so we're just getting little drops of Cam. And eventually she keeps encountering Cam at different places. Depending on what she's doing in the day, she has sort of found him. And she's like, why is this? Maybe I'm supposed to be kissed, and that's how I'll get out of the time loop. And she kind of eventually keeps on encountering him at different spots, learning more about him. And he seems to subconsciously increasingly know about her, even though he doesn't recognize that he knows her in the time loop. And no one else seems to do that. And so she sees this special connection with him, right? But we remain very focused on Noelle even at that point. And that's why I would kind of place this much more as like a contemporary fiction with a major romantic subplot where it's contemporary sci-fi, I guess, with a major romantic subplot than a romance. Because we're so focused on all of the things going on with her and her working through these struggles. And the romance is really lovely, and there's so much description of great food dates and her trying every dumpling in the city because she is trying to find the dumpling that she ate. And things that, like them encountering each other at a cafe and a brewery, and just that is a litany of really wonderful, joyful stuff. But this is about introspection. This is about her working through the difficulties that she's got in her life and through the burnout at her job and learning to stand up for herself, learning to have better relationships with her family. So she felt like the core of this story. It also is a very, very slow-paced story. So there's both not a ton of romance overtly at the foreground, and there's not a lot of pacing. So I think those things I ended up liking this even more for, but the average reader going into this, picking this up expecting kind of a fluffy romance, is most likely going to be disappointed or not get delivered what they're expecting, especially with the very slow pacing. But I enjoyed so much that it just gave her the time to be stuck in this and to really figure things out and do that internal work. I think most people that are looking for a fluffy romance are not gonna like that though. But I have basically enjoyed everything that Jackie Lau has written, and this is probably up there with my top couple of her works that I've read, because I just connected with it so much, and I think especially the burnout aspect, really I felt with her about all of the things she was going on with work and stuff, and having gone through that with the past couple of years for sure myself, like I was relating hard. This was so lovely, so charming as far as the food and the romance. I will say, I didn't want to forget, if you are allergic to spicy scenes, this does have, I think, 3 very short descriptive sex scenes in it. So if you're interested in reading this, they could easily be skipped over, but be aware that they are present. So that is that one. Highly, highly enjoyed. Anyway, that's what I read. And onward to what I am reading now. I'm reading 2 BookTube Prize books, one on audio and one in print, but I can't talk about those right now. And I am starting just a little bit into Ancillary Justice by Ken Lucky. I have read this before, but I didn't really remember anything. I read it in a fugue state years ago when I was barely reading. And so I'm glad to return to this because it's one I think I will really enjoy, but I just don't remember. And I'm reading this for my in-person book club. And then I also have started a long buddy read, so I'll probably not show this every time, but I got a copy of Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, and it's a big chunky one. I got the audio as well, and it's 58 hours. That's gonna take a while. What else do we have? That is all for books. To what I watched, I have 2 things that I finished this week. I watched a lot of Love Island though. I'll be honest, it was mainly Love Island. I was not feeling up to watching a whole lot of other stuff. So I watched a comedy special, Patton Oswalt's new special, Tea and Scotch. Hilarious. Patton Oswalt is always funny, so that is available to watch online on YouTube for free. So check that out if you like comedy. And then I finished up Stranger Things season 5. I've been slowly making it through, like they're hour-long episodes basically. I think between like 45 minutes and an hour plus. So it was long, but I really enjoyed the final season. I feel like I saw very mixed responses, but I feel like we got, not to spoil anything, but I feel like we got some real answers. I feel like a lot of the answers were surprising, but understandable and make sense with everything that has gone on. I think we got to see the characters that we have known and loved, but also that they have grown and changed over the course of the series. Yeah. So I really enjoyed the Stranger Things final season. And that's all that I finished watching. And mainly because my week has been kind of a pile of low-grade disappointment, bummers, just general bummers in life. So I was on a high of things going great last week, and then just a litany of random stuff that was not great hit. And I think the prominent one that's a little bit more than a low-grade bummer is cat health situation with my foster cat that went very downhill very fast, and so she seems to be doing better. I've got to go pick her up from the vet in a couple hours, but she had a very hard week, and I had a very hard week as a result. A couple of really sleepless nights. She is hopefully turning the corner back to doing well, hopefully, but we will see over the next couple days. With that, I think I've rambled enough. As usual, I'm a little like discombobulated and not all here today because of the lack of sleep. So we will see if this comes out coherent at all. But I have a couple of recommendations for you. First, not really directly related to BookTube, but Heather Cox Richardson, historian, here on YouTube, is doing a series of short videos that are about a minute long it's called 250 and 250. So it's 250 minute long-ish videos about a historical concept or person over the 250 years of the US history that is celebrating an anniversary right now. So they're great, all of them that I've seen so far. But in particular, I wanted to point you all toward a video about Willa Cather, author, very beloved on BookTube, but it's also narrated by Rebecca Solnit, author and very beloved on BookTube. So I thought that was a fantastic one to highlight for you all and point you over to those. But please, feel free to browse and check out more because I have enjoyed all of them. They're great little bite-sized bits of history. And the other thing, I don't think I have highlighted this before. I know I've thought about it several times, but I don't think I've highlighted that Gavin from Genre Books is doing a sci-fi century, which is reading a book from every year for the past 100 years. And a sci-fi book, obviously. So, I mean, some of the books are more or less interesting to me, but what is interesting is that Gavin has really gone all in on this concept and is doing a video for each year. And on top of the book is talking about the context of the year, the major historical happenings, the births and deaths, the just general history of what was going on at the time. And that I have found so valuable, and I kind of can't believe the amount of work that must be. So please go check those videos out because they are really, truly informative, great videos that I hope more people will watch because they are not getting the audience they absolutely should be. And I think that's probably because people think they're just about the individual books that they may or may not be interested in. But highly recommend you go check out that whole series of videos that he's doing. I will probably just link the latest one down below and you can find the rest for yourself. But I'm certain they're easily found out there because he has marked all of the ones as Sci-Fi Century. So anyway, I think that's enough rambling for today. And with that, I will say, I hope you have a wonderful week in reading and in life, and thank you so very much for watching.